Do you think robotic pets are just toys? Well, think again. In this episode of the AgeTech podcast, I talked to Greg Olsen, director of the New York State Office for the Aging, about how a cat from Amazon sparked a tech revolution that's helping New York State serve millions of residents with technology. Stay tuned because this story is truly inspiring. Greg, welcome to the show.
Well, thanks so much for having me. I'm excited.
Thank you so much for joining. So, your organization has been working with older adults and age tech companies for a number of years now, at least since COVID, to the best of my knowledge. And I want to maybe look back into like the origin story behind all of this wonderful work that you're doing and I want to ask you, like, what got you started? What got you interested in technology? And what got you started in utilizing technology to help older New Yorkers?
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be an interesting story. I appreciate the question. We actually started using tech in 2018. So it was prior to COVID. You see behind me, I have animatronic pets. And that's really where it started completely by accident. So I just, for your audience members, they're going to know this. There's a myth out there that older adults don't use technology, and it's exactly that. It's a myth. AARP does a report every year. And in 2024, it was the first time in history that older adults use tech at the same rate everybody else does. So, you know, we're not trying to introduce tech to take the place of human beings. But the fact of the matter is, there's a lot of people that don't have any social support systems, and we can kind of do both at once. But how we got into it was really interesting. The Surgeon General has talked about the last couple of years the impact of loneliness and isolation on older adults, right? It's equivalent to smoking almost a pack of cigarettes a day. It increases mortality, meaning it'll kill you, those types of things. But that data actually came out in August of 2018. And that's the first time that I read it. In our network, we oversee 59 county offices for the aging, work with 1,242 not-for-profits in the community. And we've been combating social isolation and loneliness literally for 50 years. But that's the first time somebody actually aggregated what the spending was, $7 billion to treat just in Medicare alone. And so that came out in August of 2018. Literally the same week, I came home and my young daughter, Anya, came running to the door. Daddy, I just bought this amazing cat on Amazon and I can't wait, till it comes. Hopefully it'll come before vacation. And so I said to her, honey, that's so great. I can't wait to see it. But what I was thinking is, oh, great, another stuffed animal to go into the bins of stuffed animals in the basement. Well, it showed up. And as soon as I saw it, I said to her, oh my God, this would be an amazing thing to try with some of the people who are isolated and lonely that we're already serving. And that's literally how this got started. So I did a pilot. I reached out to the company after looking at them online, had no idea that they were actually designed for the purpose that I thought we would use them for. And so we we got 12 counties to partner with us, bought 30 cats, 30 dogs, did a social isolation loneliness screen, and then at 3 months, 6 months, and 12 months. And what we found at the end of 12 months is 75% of individuals who received them had a reduction in loneliness, isolation, and actually pain. One county used the 10-point pain scale, and 75% of their clients went from a 9 to 10 on the pain scale down to a 1 or 2 after a year. And now there's been 13 or 14 other studies after ours that have really validated what, we expected. And why would we expect it? Because, there's things that matter to people regardless of age. Could be politics, could be sports, it's arts and culture, certainly pets. So I expected those types of results. And, to date, we've put out 33,650 pets, and our model is being replicated in more than 40 states across the country.
Wow, there was so much to unpack. So first of all, I did not know that this all sort of happened by chance, which is quite remarkable. I always assumed you would you identified that there was a loneliness and social isolation problem and then went ahead and looked for a solution, but it's
Well,
wonderful that it was the other way around.
We did know that, but our solutions were usually things you try to do in person, right? A friendly visitor. You have your home delivered meal driver trained who checks in on somebody. You provide transportation for people who can't drive to get them to a community event or a senior center. You do phone trees. So we've done all of those types of things. But this was the really the first time where it kind of clicked with me that technology really can be a positive solution. And to date, starting in again the fall of 2018 to today, we've launched 29 public-private partnerships with the tech companies and are serving a million more people for literally pennies on the dollar.
Wow, amazing. And it sounds like the Joy for All, the robotic cats and dogs, were possibly the most effective intervention out of everything that you've tried. Is that true?
They are one of many. What we have found, because we measure everything. So, we have a partnership with Intuition Robotics. They developed the ElliQ, which is a proactive AI, where you literally create a relationship with this device who really becomes a companion and a friend. And we're seeing reductions in loneliness and isolation in the 95% rate. We've been working with them for 3 years, but also an improvement in overall health and wellness because of some of the other features it provides, again, in the mid 90s. So there's a lot of different solutions. And what we try not to do here is to duplicate, but really to vet companies that, based on my experience doing this type of work for 33 years, both in the community with families, in the legislature, and now at state government, is to fill gaps that I know exist, and that's really what we've done.
That's amazing. Full disclosure, I was the first employee at Intuition Robotics, and I did not ask Greg to specifically mention the company, but I'm so happy to hear that ElliQ was so effective in improving the outcomes of this program. So I wonder, what does the process currently look like? You've been doing this for 7 years. What does the process currently look like in terms of identifying a need and then going out to find a solution to pilot?
So, how it really happens is kind of organic. You mentioned the pandemic, and the pandemic really, for us, put this on steroids. We had to find a different way to provide services very quickly, change our business model overnight, because in New York, we had a stay at home order for people over the age of 75, people with compromised immune system, health issues. Everything was shut down, as you know, whether it be libraries, senior centers, and nursing homes, assisted living. So people were really isolated. And, how I got involved with Intuition Robotics is we just happened to be on a national call together. I was asked repeatedly by SAMHSA, the Administration for Community Living, CMS, Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services, to present on our pandemic response. And so through that process, I got connected with companies who then asked if they could, talk to me about what they've done. And, if it fit, as I mentioned, with gaps that I knew existed, then, we did a pilot and we measure them to see if they're effective or not. That's not something usually government does. So we're very unique in that way. And again, the reason why is because, you should never be, stuck. You should always be trying to evolve, always trying to expand services, even if you don't have dollars to do that. How to serve more people, how to serve them more effectively, not to replace, but to add to the toolbox. So, that's really what we've done. And then because of these partnerships, people talk to each other and they say, how did you get a contract with Greg in New York? Can you give me his number? And so I literally, and I'm not exaggerating, I probably vet two companies a week for the last 4 years. And so what I'm seeing now is a lot of duplication, a lot of replication, taking an original platform and maybe adding some features. So it's kind of the same with a little bit of, enhancements to it. And then I also, get asked to speak around the country at AgeTech conferences. And so, there's a lot of startups that we have really helped put on the map that have expanded exponentially. But I think one of the greatest fears I have is what's going on at the federal level right now. And are we going to be able to continue to not only replicate and expand, but to try new things? And right now, the jury's out on that.
That actually leads me to my next question. How does funding work? Is it a combination of federal and state funding?
So it's a unique question. Some of it was, I mean, the funding that we get from the federal government and the state is required by law to go to the counties for services. So, from their perspective, there's a lot of flexibility in federal and state funds. If they want to do this on their own, they can. For me, it's mostly admin dollars, right? Whether that be our federal admin dollars, whether that be stimulus federal dollars, which will expire September of 2025. And then there's some additional funding in my budget to help individuals stay at home. And so I don't want to say risk in a bad way, but I feel it's my responsibility to take the risk, quote unquote, to try some of these things, to measure them. And then the goal is really there's a short term goal and a long term goal. If we can endorse that something actually works and put our logo on it, then that sends a message to the general public, to my counterparts across the country, to people within the state that this is a good product and that we've done this. There are a lot of older adults and people like me that can afford to purchase these products. They're very low budget in a lot of cases on their own. It's not the responsibility of government to buy everything for everybody. We just can't do that. I wish that we could, but we can't. But there's a private market out there, but people don't know what they don't know, and they don't know who to trust. And so having our logo as an endorsement with some of these companies is really important. Then there's Medicare Advantage plans, there's managed long term care plans, there's general Medicaid, right? There's other state agencies where some of the things that we're doing may be applicable to their constituents, even if they're not older. And so that's really been my goal the whole time is to, test things out, see if they work, and then share the results with others so that we can expand and replicate.
That makes a lot of sense that having the New York State Office for Aging logo on a company or a product saying, we vetted this, we know it works, it makes a lot of sense that others would follow suit. I wonder how difficult or how easy was it to initially convince the counties to run these pilots? Because I imagine required a lot from their staff on the ground.
Well, not necessarily. So the way that we do things, and not all of these pilots are with the county offices for the aging. A lot of them are, but a lot of them aren't purposely. So what we traditionally do is, one of my partners is Becky Prevey. She's the executive director of the Association on Aging. So they represent our 59 counties. And, either we vet these together or one or both of us vet them independently. And then we come together. And if we think it's something that we want to try, then what we do is we do an in depth presentation with that company to the offices for the aging. After that, we will survey them and ask them if they would like to participate. That is really key because I can't force a county to engage in a pilot, and I don't want to. I want counties that recognize that this could be a potential solution to a problem, and I want them to self select. Yes, I want to participate because if they do that, they're going to implement it a lot better if they're on board and understand what we're trying to do. The companies that we work with have really bent over backwards to make it as easy as possible for the counties or our other providers so that it's really not a heavy lift. And that's really been a working process that has worked extraordinarily well for a number of years.
Essentially, it sounds like you obviously have to make a lot of effort to get buy-in from the counties. And then, I mean, after you prove its success, obviously it's a no-brainer for everyone else who wants and has the budget to adopt these solutions because you have already tested them out and have proven that there's positive ROI and it allows them to make more out of the funding that they already have.
Yeah, in essence, that's right. I mean, there's some of the projects that are sustainable, meaning the money's in the budget every single year. So, I got to give Governor Hochul a lot of credit. I asked for almost $3 million a few years ago for sustainability in some of the projects. So those would be things like virtual senior center, get set up, ageless innovation, intuition robotics. So those dollars are secure, they are recurring. And so we can continue to do those. Other things are, designed to be 1 year pilots. Some of them I've extended if I have the ability to do that, others that I don't. But the best spokespeople for the validity and value of these, in addition to the data that I'm able to provide to them, are their peers. And again, it's all part of the strategy.
And after all of this happens on the state level, how often do you find that Medicare Advantage plans or other states following your footsteps, basically, and say, hey, Greg has vetted this. We're going to go ahead and adopt this too for our care recipients?
So there's two answers to that. On the payer side, it's very difficult. It shouldn't be. So one of the things that we do is in our comprehensive assessment, we know who the older adults insurance company is, whether it's traditional Medicare Advantage, and then what those plans are. So we've been having conversations with plans for a number of years to work with us on a pilot, because we're serving the same people, to show that, when you work together, we can have positive outcomes for your clients. It's very difficult for them to part with partnership dollars. So that's a work in progress that, we're going to continue to work on. The other states, a lot of the things that we've launched here are being replicated across the country. I probably speak at 5 to 7 national conferences every single year, and it's on things like this: the economic value of older adults, because we live in an ageist society and we think older people are a drain on resources. They absolutely are not. We would not have a local, regional, statewide, or national economy without them. You wouldn't have a not-for-profit sector without their volunteer contributions. Many are still working. They pay 40% of the taxes. So that's a really important message of the why are we doing these things, because we want people to be as healthy and well in their communities for as long as possible. That's where they want to be. And that's what these results show that we can do, in addition to our regular book of business. So it's not that hard. I think the questions that I usually get from others was one of the questions you asked me: how did you do it? Where'd you get the money? And it's we're able to be creative here.
It's wonderful. And I love that you make sure that you speak on all of these stages and not just say, yes, technology is great and we can use it to help our older population, but this is a population that is still contributing to society. And so we must put in the effort to support them for as long as they live in our states.
Well, you do. And, the hardest thing is combating the stereotypes and ageist attitudes that we all grew up with. When I got into working with older adults 33 years ago, the things that I would see in books, in cartoons for my kids, in movies, versus what my real life experience was working with organizations that were run by older adults and understanding what their backgrounds and histories and passions were, they didn't line up. And so, really wanted to try to start to talk about older adults differently. And to do that, you got to find the data to back it up. And so, I'm fortunate that I have a demographer on staff, and I asked him to start pulling open source data. And, he gave me a bunch of raw files that I put together into a narrative, and then worked with AARP to, encourage them to do the same, which is where they came out with their 50 plus longevity economy. So anybody out there, type in 50 plus longevity economy and your state, and you will actually see what the contributions are. Now, we go way further. So like, I know in New York that older adults, their spending supports 6 million jobs. Their GDP that's the goods and services they produce, $729 billion, 43%. They support 40% of state and local taxes. And then you look at things like volunteerism. We have almost a million volunteers providing 500 million hours of service at an economic value of $13.8 billion. $59 billion in Social Security comes to local communities. Pensions equal almost $95 billion, but nobody talks about aging that way. And when you do, it's like, oh my God, right? If we can help, older people stay healthy, active, engaged. We did a statewide needs assessment survey where older adults plan on working into their mid to late 70s. I'm not surprised by that at all because of the longevity, right? And that's so good for social connections. maintaining your health insurance, not drawing down your social security benefit, which will only grow when you do retire, being mentally and physically active. All of those things are really positive, and we have a job market that really could utilize older adults. So that's the why. And that's why we're doing what we're doing.
That actually leads me to my next question. Speaking of this needs assessment that you did statewide, what are some of the current challenges older adults are dealing with that you're actively looking for solutions for? Maybe we have startups in the audience who have solutions and will want to reach out.
It's really hard to say because what the statewide need, we had 127,000 responses. That is a huge sample size. And you've got people from 60 to 105. The ethnicity of those who took the survey mirrors the state, which I was really proud of. About 11,000 of the responses came from hard to serve communities. But then it's broken down by county. And so it's different everywhere, but it's the traditional things, right? It is loneliness and isolation. But what I found fascinating, and I'll pick that one specifically, that older people know about what's happening in their community. But then when the question says, do you go to any of these things? They say no. Transportation is always going to be an issue, housing. So it's the things that have been around for a while that need, whether it be bricks and mortar support, meaning capital investments, that's one thing. But then there are other ways that if the community uses those types of studies, and ours are all available on our website, the needs assessment for those counties, we've provided them to all the counties, all the legislators, so they can see what the responses are in their community. And one of the projects I'm really excited about is working with Jim Furman at Better Age, who's developed a tool, and we supported its development and testing that really digs down individually to a person's overall public health and how they feel about themselves. Are they in crisis? Are they thriving? What are those areas so that you can tailor those solutions because you actually ask somebody what's important to them or where they're struggling or not.
That's amazing. And I wonder, since you found that people know what's available, but they still don't access it, I wonder if the same could be said for some of the tech that some of the counties offer. Do people know that these solutions exist for them in their county and they know how to
Nobody
access
knows
them?
no. Government doesn't know they exist. Triple A's and other providers don't know they exist. And the public doesn't know they exist. You don't know what you don't know until you know it. And the beauty of being on this journey is getting exposed to these different types of solutions that you didn't know existed. And then when they fit into an area where we know there's a gap, that's when we take action. So one of the biggest questions I get when I meet with investors or startup companies, the big issue is sustainability. What happens after the investment or the pilot project? And what I continue to tell them is you're not going to succeed without the public trust. The public has no idea of the breadth and magnitude of what's available, whether it be for somebody with Alzheimer's disease, their caregiver, somebody with a disability. There's so many different interventions. And how do you know which one is good? How do you know which one works? And how do you trust it as not a scam? So let's talk about that for a second, because we do a lot of work with financial fraud and elder abuse. Scams cost older adults $28 billion a year. And what we tell them is if the phone rings, right, and you don't know the number, don't answer the phone. Don't click any link in your texts or your emails. So the biggest issue that companies have is going to be how you get the public's trust. And that goes back again to our logo and others who have tried it and tested it and say, this is solid. But that's going to be the number one challenge of all of these tech companies, is how to get face to face with the public. And we can help with those types of things for the projects that we've done. But if you're going direct to consumer, how do you know that you're trusted?
Absolutely. So let's say that we have people in the audience watching or listening to this podcast, and they go on a startup's website and they see your logo and they say, hey, I live in New York State. How do I get this for myself or for an older loved one? How do they go about getting the product?
So it depends. And not to be evasive, but like our partnership with Get Set Up, we fully subsidize that for anybody over the age of 50. So anybody can go to our website, which is aging.ny.gov, and there's three projects that are available to anybody in New York State. One is Get Set Up, that's for people 50 and over, for people 50 and over. And you have access to 5,000 classes, lifelong learning, can learn about your tech, all kinds of different things, and that's free. We have two caregiver platforms. One is the New York Caregiver Portal, which is powered by TrueAlta. That is available to any caregiver, regardless of age or who they're caring for. It's an evidence based platform that helps individuals based on their profile, who they're caring for, really tailor support solutions to the customer. And then working with archangels out of Boston, Massachusetts, who developed the Caregiver Intensity Index, which takes less than 2 minutes and can really gauge the areas of your life that you're struggling with on your caregiving journey, but also those things that support you. All of these things are designed then to connect you with resources. On other things, we have to be very careful. So let's take intuition robotics, for example. We have a cap based on the funding that we have of about 900 units. Now, there's going to be about 15 to 20% turnover every year for a variety of reasons. Somebody leaves their home, somebody unfortunately dies, they wind up in a nursing home. Then that unit then goes back to the county, it gets scrubbed, and then we can redeploy it. But when I publicly talk about them, it's not something that I can offer to every New Yorker, which is why I said, you can look at the data on the impact, but if families believe that this would be a real benefit, then they can contact the company directly. So it is kind of a tightrope. On the animatronic pets, we survey our AAAs every year. We'll be doing it again in about 2 weeks. And if we come in under budget, then I reach out to the next level, which are, not-for-profits that we've been working with, other types of partners. So there's a variety of different ways. I wish that I had an endless budget where I could just buy all of these things on behalf of everybody, but I can't. And, frankly, not every family needs that.
Absolutely. And it's amazing that you've been able to do what you've been able to do with the budget that you do have. And like you said, some of these solutions are quite affordable. You can get some of these on Amazon for like $100 or $150. You can definitely get software solutions for a subscription that's around $20 or $30 a month. So for many families, just making them aware that these solutions exist is a huge leg up, and it allows them to then go and purchase it out of pocket if they can afford it.
Yeah, they could purchase it out of pocket. You might reach a not-for-profit. We published a report in the fall of 24 with 18 of our 29 projects. What it is, very easy to read. One pagers each, has the outcomes in there. We do press releases. I have my own show called Live with Greg. Every episode we do something different. We're reaching 120,000 people with every episode. It's crazy. But there's a lot of ways to get the information out. And I'll tell you, again, one that we really love is called Discover Live. And what Discover Live does, it either individually, which is new, but it's really designed for a group setting. So it could be like a library, it could be one of our naturally occurring retirement communities, it could be a senior center, but a place where people can gather to make friends, to interact with each other. But what they're allowed to do is 1 hour per week for an entire year to go to 200 locations around the world. So I've done 3 of them. I've been to Slovenia, I've been to Prague, and I've been to Amsterdam. And they're interactive, they're showing you the history, but you're with a group of people and you create friendships, etc. The cost of that for a senior center for the entire year is $529. So I pay for it. And then when the year is over, you can't pick that up, $529 to continue? And the answer is, of course you can. And again, that's kind of our strategic model is I'll take the risk to try it. If it fails, it's not a failure, you learn something. But if it succeeds, then hopefully people will find that the experience was such that they would want to continue.
That makes a lot of sense, and that you sort of take on the risk of it not working out for a specific community. I wonder, since some of the specifically software solutions have multiple competitors, how do you pick and choose which one to pilot? Or have you had any instances where you piloted multiple solutions who were very similar and you ended up only choosing one or none?
No. So, if it's a software solution for our counties, that goes through a procurement. That's like a reporting system. But I think one of the most impressive, and again, we started with a small pilot, is Blooming Health. And what Blooming Health does, and they've grown exponentially. We are now using that in 40 counties. It's a two-way communication mechanism that has increased engagement among our older adult residents by 300%. It has increased benefit and applications to things like SNAP by 500%. It comes in 80 languages. It allows us to shoot messages out. There's going to be a snowstorm, or to identify additional needs. It allows us to get information back. What are those additional needs? How's somebody doing on their self-wellness check, on their isolation and loneliness? So it does all of these things by phone, landline, or through text or SMS. We're hitting 47% of the rural areas. And why does phones matter? And I'm going to age myself. I grew up with a phone hanging on the wall, as most people did. And everybody that we serve absolutely did. There were no cell phones at the time. And so that's the way we grew up. That's what we're used to. But there's a lot of areas of the state that do not have broadband. So a cell phone you may or may not have, a smartphone you may or may not have, but you have a landline. You probably have internet connection, and it filled a huge gap. Through the platform, we've identified individuals that had 20,000 additional needs. Now, mind you, these are people that are on our case manager's caseload, and we're still identifying additional things, a quality improvement. Like I said, one of the biggest outcomes was case managers saving 2 hours every day because they don't have to make phone calls to 200 clients individually. You can do something by blast, get information back if there's follow-up needed because somebody is in a crisis or, needs something.
That is amazing. I know how overburdened and overstressed these case managers are, and that is 2 hours a day. Wow.
Right?
Um,
I mean, it's incredible.
wow. You touched a little bit about on the connectivity issue in rural areas, and I wonder, I mean, we've had the Aging Connected report came out in 2021, I think. It let us all know that we had millions of Americans, particularly in rural areas, who don't have broadband access at all, which is obviously a huge barrier for tech adoption. How can you, if at all, deal with that on the state level?
So, during the Biden administration, access nationwide to technology was a priority. And there are billions and billions of dollars that were made available to states if they develop a plan. And why? Because what we learned again during COVID, right, is those individuals couldn't have their kids go to school remotely. If you're a business and you're working out of your home or you're working in a dead zone area, you can't run your business. And then, of course, has an impact on older adults as well. So this isn't an older adult issue. So every state submitted a plan. Funding just became available, and I believe it was under the Inflation Reduction Act. I haven't heard that any of those dollars have been paused, but some of the federal dollars have been put forward. And then the states in 2025 can also put out dollars, not only to build the infrastructure, to actually get the broadband, universal. And we often think it's just rural areas. There are dead spots in New York City. I live literally 6 miles outside of downtown Albany in a suburban neighborhood, and my cell signal is not good at my house. It just doesn't make any sense. I don't understand it. So there are pockets everywhere. So in addition to the infrastructure, right, getting the broadband, providing the dollars to actually buy the technology, Governor Hochul and the legislature passed a discount internet law. I believe it's $15 a month for access. But then there's a focus on specific populations, and we check almost all the boxes. Veterans is a priority. Well, 70% of New York State veterans, 440,000, are over the age of 60. We have 30,000 on our caseload. Individuals with disabilities, we check that box. And then, of course, we work with people who are younger. Non-English speaking, check that box. Hard to serve populations, check that box. Cultural and ethnic minorities, we check that box. People who are looking to reskill to go back to work, we check that box. So when you think about it holistically, there's an infrastructure and technology, effort underway to do that. And then there's additional resources to get to those areas where we know that individuals are traditionally not using tech, either because they don't know how to, or they can't afford it, or they don't have the equipment.
So it means that there is hope. And hopefully by the end of this year, next year, anyone who wants to get connected will be able to do so. Hopefully.
That's the goal. It's always good to have hope, right?
Yes, I'm hopeful. If not this year, then next year. It's obviously long overdue. So that was actually my last question. Is there anything that we didn't talk about that you would like to add? Any call to action to our viewers or listeners?
Well, again, I think, it's hard to know what's out there, right? You don't need to know what you don't need to know until you need to know it. And here's what I mean by that. I'll just take two examples. I didn't need to know about TAP or Pell until my kids went to college. I didn't need to know about New York's star property tax exemption until I bought a home. Human services, aging is included, is people are not aware of not only the direct community services, but also these technology options because they don't need to know it. When they find that they do need to know it, something happened, a crisis happened. And that's just the nature of the game. People don't ask for help until they're literally in crisis. That's part of our cultural makeup. I don't like it, but it is what it is. Pull yourself up by your bootstraps. It's a sign of weakness if you ask for help. That can be anything but the truth, but that, again, is part of our culture here, that people should be taking care of themselves. And guess what? They are. We've got 4.1 million people who are providing uncompensated care to somebody else. Families have always been the number one provider of social services, the number one provider of long-term care, and they are incredibly important to the healthcare system. So, it's hard to recommend to somebody to, whether it be visit our site and look at our innovations report and some of the tech things that we're doing. I wish people took the time to understand what's available to them if and when they need it. We spend more time looking at, the specs on an oven when your oven goes down than what you need to successfully age, whether that be an elder law attorney or, what are the programs and services that the Office for Aging and their providers provide in my community. That's something I hope we get around as the population gets older. But there are so many things out there. And so for any of your startups, we will always do, a free pilot. At this point, I don't know where we are with funding. We're going through the state budget now. The federal budget is, who knows? And hopefully we can continue to do that. But I have gotten a couple reach out that said, we don't need you to provide the funding. We want to demonstrate the effectiveness. That I will do anytime because that's easy. I hope I answered that question. It's like I said, I don't think people are out there looking for, well, what's the solution to this? What's the solution for that? And I think the number one question I get is, what's the next big solution you're looking for? And my answer is always the same. I have no idea, but I'll know it when I see it.
That's wonderful. Greg, thank you so much for coming on the show today and for being so open about your experience. I can't think, honestly, of a better partner on any state in the United States to partner than with you and the New York State Office for Aging. Thank you so much.
Well, thanks for having me. And this has really been an honor and a privilege. Thank you.
If you enjoyed this episode and want to learn more about one of the startups that New York State offers its residents, check out my conversation with Lawrence Kosick from Get Set Up. I'll put the link right here. Until next time, stay humble, stay curious,